housing projects. I also, by the way, want to applaud my school board colleague, Dr. Cannon, because very recently they brought in connectivity at all of Arlington schools, as we have done through the years with respect to all of our public buildings, our libraries, our community centers, and so forth. We're also working with 2 of our advisory commissions, and this is important because, you know, one of the ways that we tap the expertise and the sense of the public is working through our 50-some advisory commissions. So with respect to internet connectivity and fiber, we're working with our Information Technology Advisory Commission, or ITAC, as well as our Emergency Preparedness Advisory Commission, or EPAC, because connectivity is absolutely essential if we are going to face a terrorist attack or an emergency situation. Our buildings have to be connected, and we can't use the excuse that this is a 70s building with impenetrable concrete. We have to be flexible, we have to be modern. Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. Well, I'll say 2, because I say 2. Well, yes, you. The gentleman in the back.
As you mentioned, this is a pretty high cost of living neighborhood, and there are a lot of high-rise apartments still going up. But despite that, I would say Roslyn's the only neighborhood that does not have a modern and fully equipped supermarket. I know a while back there were plans to have one built just a few blocks from here, and it seems to have gotten tabled. Can you make some comments on that if you can?
Sure. So somewhere in my pile, because I can't remember everything, so I rely on paper a lot. I'm that guy who's kind of of a certain age where you can't do everything online. Sometimes you need that paper. I still subscribe to the Washington Post print edition. So a few years ago, the county board did approve a new development project that would have included, or that will include, if it comes to fruition, a Harris Teeter or another large chain grocery store like that. I would love to see that occur. I think, the question is whether or not, because of our challenging commercial vacancy rate, whether or not that entitled developer who could go and break ground tomorrow after he files for his building permits and so forth, is going to go forward with that project. I'm not sure. In the meantime, I realize that you've got that Safeway, kind of that subterranean Safeway up the street, which is so-so at best. But I am very high on the future of Roslyn. That observation deck, which by the way Stan Carson helped leverage for community benefits, which you can go up to that observation deck 7 days a week free of charge if you're an Arlington resident. That was thanks to the county board about 10 years ago, but it was also thanks to Stan Carson and the RAFOM Civic Association who really advocated for that. There's a new food hall that's going into the building 2 of Central Place. You're getting a very high-end Italian restaurant. It's not going to be the same thing as Tom Sari's Orleans House, and I know that a number of you still remember that. But just a couple of other things, and I want to be very vigilant with respect to development in Roslyn. The Holiday Inn is going to be coming in very soon with a redevelopment submission. The Marriott Hotel across the park is going to be coming in as well. And development is good, but we need to work together to make sure it works for the folks who already live here. Thank you.
So thank you for the question. I've sat down with the Roslyn Business Improvement District, and I do think their leadership is strong, and they're looking for greater partnership from the county staff, the community planning, housing, and development, and I think that's critical. Having the Roslyn bid lead is going to help us cut through some of the red tape that frankly is there. This is an area where the time that it takes to work through our development process is so significant. We've got to cut it and make clearer paths so that we can move forward when there's support from the community for a facility like Simple Supermarket. I would agree that this, there's Safeways in DC that are worse, but that Safeway is not where I shop. So I do think that's a real challenge. I also think that we've been slower on the sector plan, the Roslyn sector plan, than I think we should. There are costs, of course, to change, but if we had been more nimble, I think the development that the redevelopment that you're seeing that would lead to office space being fulfilled would have been much faster than if we had than it has been. I think the Roslyn bid can help lead us there, but we're also going to need to support that. We're going to need leaders in the community that are both checking regularly with RAFOM and the civic associations across the county, but also working quickly and working honestly to move forward projects that need to move forward. There's a fair number of buildings in Roslyn, as in Crystal City, much more in Crystal City, that are physically not the sort of buildings where businesses want to locate, and that hinders some of the redevelopment that might be necessary that could lead to that, that facility that we all need in this community. So thanks for the question.
Yes, Stuart, and then maybe one more. Stuart.
I'm sure both John and Matt, both of you are familiar with the housing conservation district study going on. Very enthusiastically made it to a working group meeting, hoping the types of things that John mentioned about options to be able to keep places. But the whole goal of this whole study was to preserve affordable units we have now, marks. And I was never more disgusted or horrified at any meeting I've ever gone to, and that's an awful lot of meetings in this county, because it seems to be morphing into, instead, a plan to incentivize redevelopment. That's all the rest of planning. This is the only thing they're talking about preservation. And talking about incentivizing it, they're talking about basically destroying these fragile few little areas of affordability that the whole idea was to save. And by the way, just so you, one last little thing, and that is, in neighboring Roslyn, the county is doing a lousy job of retaining current businesses. It's great to have Nestle and everything else, but they're being priced out, and in some cases, some of the restaurants that have been here forever have actually been driven out, potentially by developers. Okay. So my question is, what do you feel about those two things?
I don't know. We go back and forth all the time. This is our fifth debate. We got like 5 more. So Stuart, housing conservation districts. There's tension right now because the whole goal of a housing conservation district, or HCD, is to preserve our current stock of garden apartments. So-called market rate affordable units, not subsidized, but they're affordable because, frankly, they're of a certain age, a certain vintage, maybe with not all the amenities that so many people want these days. The nice thing about garden apartment complexes is that they're already there. They already fit within the context of a neighborhood. There's green space, there's trees. Garden apartments, you may not have a working garden, but it's a very pleasant place to be. There's a number of garden apartment complexes in Roslyn, not as many as there used to be. So what the county decided was, in order to preserve those garden apartment complexes, they would put circles around them and make them housing conservation districts and not allow a developer to do what he could by right, and that is to bulldoze the garden apartment in favor of townhouses. So going back a couple of years ago, what really kind of set the stage for the current conversation we're having is what happened in my neighborhood in Westover. So on both sides of Washington Boulevard, just blocks from my house, certain developers started gobbling up the affordable housing garden apartment complexes, bulldozing them and building luxury townhouses. So we formed a partnership with the full support of the county board with the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, and we saved 68 units. Now that's not enough. It's expensive to preserve these units, but it was a start. So anyway, the tension is the developer, I should say the owners who have these affordable housing complexes, They want more incentive than our county staff is willing to give them right now to redevelop. They want to go higher, they want to develop, preserve some, but not all. And that's the tension that we're having. And I appreciate what you're saying, Stu.
So I agree with the listlessness of the working group on Phase 2 and the housing conservation districts. I think that there has not been enough structure on it. But I think that big picture on housing conservation districts, this is a difference between John and I. I testified for them. He voted against them. He felt that by right was so critical, and property rights, at least that's my impression, that by right was so critical that the owners of those buildings should have a right to redevelop. And that is a reasonable version of property rights. It's not the public use that I think is the right thing for Arlington. Because preserving those units is critical. Once they're gone, we've lost 14,500 market rate units in Arlington since the year 2000. We have to preserve the ones that are there because we can't, it's hard to afford to build new ones. Now, that said, I said when I testified before the county board, and I'd say it again, the process for Phase 2, the benefits that are going to result from this reasonable public restriction on housing, these red brick garden style apartments. Westover is a good example. Credit John with it, working with Apple on the 68. But the big picture policy, that wasn't right. We do need to figure out how to do Phase 2 and the benefits in a way that makes sense. And we've got to have more oversight, because frankly, the members of the Housing Commission that are working on it, they don't feel bought in. This is an example of the Arlington way not working in my view. So that's on housing conservation districts. I do want to say on Nestle and the businesses, I agreed with the decision on Nestle, but I think it's, we do have a problem that we have to look at, and other cities have looked at it, other counties, urban counties, suburban counties have looked at it, to see whether or not we're providing any benefits to a commercial property owner to hold out property when what we need is businesses in that property to get moving. And that's a step I think we should take.
Well, I think, what?
844. That's 844.
Pardon?
No, it's
844.
844.
Yeah, I know, and
You have two.
I have a gentleman who has his hand raised over here before.
Make the last one. Is that okay?
Is that all right, Steve?
One more and then we're ready.
Our board member, Steve.
We gotta get ready for that tomorrow night.
Our board member, Steve, just said it's okay, we don't have to call him. Thank you, Steve. All right, another question.
Well, my question is, do you support providing tax incentives to Amazon?
I think I get to go first on this one. Then.
Sure.
So Arlingtonians that I talk to it is totally reasonable to be concerned about what Amazon would mean for this community. And it's absolutely reasonable to be worried. We do have had up to a 25% vacancy rate in Crystal City. And there are ways to structure incentives. The bulk of the incentives, if they came, would be from the state of Virginia, not from Arlington. We have been fairly limited in the number of incentives that we've provided out of the total number of economic development agreements. What I've said is, if there are clear provisions that, like Nestle, and I was raised not to love Nestle as a kid, but it was the right thing to do to bring them into that empty building. We have to, if there is community benefit agreements that that company only gets the incentives if they meet job targets, and if those clauses are clear, and there is a reasonable plan to address schools, housing, and transportation, and there is incentives for small businesses that reach the same levels as with Amazon, then I think we have to look at it and see how it pencils out. Such a high commercial vacancy rate in Crystal City, those buildings, no one wants to be in those cinder block buildings. So we have to think about how do we make that attractive and how do we address the needs of the whole community. So those are the conditions that I would set to consideration of Amazon. I would say one other thing, which is that many in the community from across the political spectrums have said they're very concerned about the transparency issue. In my view, if we get to the next stage, then I think the broad parameters of the deal need to come forward. We as a community cannot agree to this giant of an agreement without at least knowing some parameters of the agreement. I don't think we should do what Larry Hogan did, $8 billion here, take it. But if we get to that next stage, there needs to be some of the details. We don't need to negotiate economic deals on the front page of the Post, but we do need some of the broad parameters of the deal. And if it aligns with our values at that stage, and those clawback provisions are there, and there are protections for us, then I think we have to consider it.
So I do want to eat into my time on this question, just to go back to one thing on housing conservation districts. So yes, I did vote against it. I did vote against it because we didn't have the carrots and the sticks married up at the same time. What we were basically doing, according to the Arlington Chamber of Commerce, and I agreed with their perspective on this, I didn't agree with them on the country club relief bill, by the way, was that if we're going to tell an owner of a property, you can't do what you were entitled to do just yesterday, that there needs to be a quid pro quo or something that we are giving to that owner of that property in return, and that is reasonable development incentives. Now, to Stuart's question, it's all about what that right balance is. But we basically froze in amber these garden apartment complexes, which at first blush sounds great, but think about the owner's equity and think about what sort of incentives is he going to have to upgrade that property and keep it going, as opposed to letting it get run into the ground and then sell out. With respect to Amazon, you know, what's fascinating about this question is that you have people from the left and the right kind of united, really, in opposition to granting economic development incentives for Amazon. And what's fascinating is those on the left, and I don't mean to stereotype here, but many on the left say Amazon is a bad corporate citizen, that, you know, unfair labor practices, low wages, that type of thing. Whereas people on the right say that they don't want economic development incentives for Amazon because it should be a market decision. You know, if the company wants to come to a location, that's fine, but we don't need to give them a handout to do that. I think that the truth is somewhere in between, and that the fact is we cannot unilaterally disarm when it comes to economic development. All five of us are working 24/7 for economic development, despite some assertions. And we do need targeted economic incentives on occasion. We do have clawback provisions. We do make sure that they are backloaded so that they get the benefits later after arriving than a handout before they even come in. Thanks.
Right, well, we now went up to the clip.
Stan, can I close, please?
This is not closed
Okay,
yet.
sorry.
I was going to introduce that.
Yeah.
Closing statement now, 1 minute each from the two candidates.
No, right that I start now. I feel like every time.
Yeah.
All right, yes, yeah. Sorry about that, Stan, and thanks everyone for coming. I appreciate the chance to share some ideas about who I am, a little bit about who I am, and some ideas about what I would do on the county board. We are having a ton of debates, and we all agree that Arlington is a great place to live. Still, as I said at the beginning, it's not perfect. Our conversations around reconstruction of Iwo Jima Memorial that I was at previous RAFOM meeting, a quick look at the county budget, and efforts to get the county to respect historic designs. I know that's an issue that you've worked on quite a bit. Those indicate we have work to do. First and foremost, we have to focus on that commercial vacancy rate. I do think that the county board is working hard. At some point, though, after 4 years, in your top 3 priorities, or in what you do, you have to bring it down from 18 to 22% vacillating is still not where we need to be. It needs to be the burning priority for your next county board member. It will be for me. I've looked at this for small and medium-sized cities in other communities. I've served Arlington. I'd love to have the chance to serve you. I'd ask for your vote on November 6th.
All right. Thanks to everyone for listening tonight. I hope that I've earned your vote, not just for my accomplishments or what I plan to do for the next 4 years, but because of the balance and perspective and the debate that I bring to the board every day. You know, it's easy to make too much of political endorsements, but I'm proud of the fact that I'm supported by 10 former Arlington school board members, including 6 Democrats, who don't have to worry about the next election, and by 3 incumbent Democratic county officers office holders who do. County Treasurer Carla De La Pava, our Commonwealth's Attorney Theo Stamos, and my colleague Libby Garvey. Former school board chair Sally Baird said this: "I so appreciate the balance and perspective John represents. I hope you agree with Sally that I brought balance to the board, and I need your help to keep it there. Whether it's Roslyn streets, aircraft noise, the boathouse, or development issues in your backyard, I'm working hard for you. I need your vote on November 6th or before." Thank you very much.